Good evening. Welcome to this evening's event. Welcome to the 100 debates on the environment and more. We're going to start by asking participants to mute if they're not speaking, and that will keep the background noise to a minimum. And I'll begin by a land acknowledgement. As a community, we have the responsibility to honor, care for, and respect all the creation gives to provide us with life. This includes the land, water, air, fire, animals, plants, and our ancestors. The Anishinaabe peoples have utilized this land for millennia, and we would like to acknowledge their direct descendants, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, as the rightful caretakers and title holders of this land upon which we live, work, and conduct ourselves. We acknowledge our treaty relationships and responsibilities to both the land and these original peoples. We also recognize that this land is rich in pre-contact history and customs, which includes the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee, and since European contact has and continues to become home for Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. It is in the spirit and intent of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement, whereby we will collectively care for and respect the land, water, animals, and each other in the interests of peace and friendship, and for the benefit of not only ourselves, but to our future descendants.
Thank you, Cindy. My name is Darla Campbell, and my co-moderator is Cindy Toth. We are pleased to be here this evening, and thank you to Ann Douglas as our timekeeper. Process, how we will be asking questions. So next slide. Thank you for joining us for the 100 debates on the environment and more. This debate is part of GreenPAC's 100 debates on the environment. The Halton Environmental Network, HACEN, and their partners are bringing you this debate in all 5 Halton regions tonight, simultaneously. HACEN, their partners and supporters have been working hard the last few weeks, calling all candidates and requesting their engagement for tonight's debate. We would like to thank all the candidates here this evening who agreed to come and speak to us tonight about climate, the environment, and more. These candidates have made time in their busy schedules to join us, and we look forward to sharing the recording of this debate widely within our community. This evening, there will be a series of questions posed to the candidates. The first 2 questions are from the GreenPAC and HACEN as part of the 100 debates on the environment and more, and similar questions are being asked right across Canada tonight. The last 5 to 6 questions are brought to you by our partners and members of the public. The questions from the public were submitted to us in advance of tonight's debate. HACEN and our partners adjudicated the community questions and will be sharing the top 5 questions that will be shared later tonight via Zoom poll. And this is your chance to select your top 2 questions, and the most popular 2 questions will be asked to the candidates. So stay tuned for more. Finally, the candidates will have 2 to 3 minutes to share their final remarks with us, and we will close the Zoom webinar. So the next slide, and now for a bit of housekeeping. So to make sure you are I'm going to introduce the organizations first. Then, the Canadian Federation of University Women, CFUW, is a national organization of over 8,000 women in Canada whose members support equality, social justice, fellowship, and lifelong learning for women and girls. And I have served as president of CFUW Oakville and chair of the Scholarship Fund. And our next partner slide is the Halton Environmental Network. HACEN strives to make the community of Halton a region with educated citizens, engaged stakeholders, and best practice policies for climate change mitigation and adaptation and environmental sustainability. Next slide. All right, so meet your candidates. So now it's time to meet the candidates. We have, prior to the call today, we drew names from a hat, and here's the order of candidates. I'll read the names, and we'll give them each 1 minute to introduce themselves. So first we'll hear from Jerome Adamo from the NDP party. Jerome.
I'm so excited to be here with you tonight. My name is Jerome Adamo, and I'm a community activist and an educator here living in Oakville, and I'm putting my name forward to be the member of parliament because I see it to be very clear. See, I'm not running to provide you any excuses. I'm running because the NDP is the only party that has the solutions for this crisis, this climate crisis that's impacting Canadian families. And COVID-19 has taught us that emergencies need to be tackled urgently and with the political will to do what it takes. So I'm proud to be here to speak about why the NDP is the only party with the real plan and the real record fighting for you. So I look forward to the debate, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Jerome. Our next speaker is Anita Anand from the Liberal Party. Anita.
Merci beaucoup et bonjour tout le monde. I'm a mom of 4 and I've lived in Oakville for 18 years, and there's no time to waste. Since 2015, our government has done more than any other federal government to reduce emissions and invest in sustainable solutions. We introduced Canada's first national climate plan and invested over $100 billion in climate action. We've taken action to get to net zero by 2050 with more work to do, of course. We've banned harmful single-use plastics to eliminate them by 2030, and we've put a price on pollution. But there's more work to do. In our platform, we pledged to ban thermal coal exports through Canada by 2030. We pledged to eliminate fossil fuel subsidies and to achieve 100% net zero emitting electricity system by 2035. Former BC Green Party leader, Dr. Andrew Weaver, called our platform plan the only credible, science-aligned climate plan put forward by any party. Our government is ensuring that we have the building blocks for a prosperous net zero emissions future for Oakville and for our entire country. Merci beaucoup.
Thanks, Anita. Next, we'll hear from JD Meany from the PPC Party.
JD, you're on mute. Please unmute. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Thank you everyone for attending tonight. I would like to thank the spectators who have attended, who are voters from Oakville and the Halton region. I would like to thank the Halton Environmental Network and the Canadian Federation of Women for hosting this debate, 100 debates on the environment. I would also like to thank the other candidates for joining me this evening for a healthy discussion about how we can solve many challenges that face us, along with some other issues that will be related to our current events, but not necessarily that of the environment. I would also like to point out tonight that with great concern, the Conservative candidate, Carrie Colburn, is not in attendance this evening. I'm disappointed that she's not with us tonight. Perhaps the moderators can maybe explain why the Conservatives have decided not to show up for these discussions. I think it is absolutely excellent that we take the time this evening to address issues that affect every Canadian, from environmental issues, which are exactly that, and they do affect all of us, and they need to be taken seriously with the correct approach. We should be having discussions about climate change with practical solutions, discussions about about COVID-19, vaccine passports, and lockdowns. I hope to hear from Oakville tonight about their largest issues, and I look forward to this evening's full discussion.
Thanks, JD. And our next speaker is Oriana Knox from the Green Party. Oriana.
Thank you. I'm Oriana Knox, pronouns she, they. I'm a certified trichologist practitioner, and I have loved living in the Halton area for 6 years now. Since I first learned about climate change, I've been educating myself on the ways I can help. However, individual action is not enough. We can make real change, starting with government. This isn't about personal virtue. It's something that we all need to solve together, and that means changing laws. I have watched our country stagnate for too long. Many people feel left out of the political process and have lost faith in our democracy altogether. I'm running for the Green Party because we are the party for this moment. We need to lift the water advisories in the First Nations, prevent labor trafficking, and transition to a green economy. When elected, I will use my position to make sure no voices are ignored. Oakville deserves a representative that will speak up. We need more accountability, transparency, and love in politics, and I will help us get there. There is no environmental justice without social justice. We will work with all levels of Parliament to change the laws to make it easier for every Canadian to make the better choices we want and need. Dare to do better, vote green. Thank you.
Thanks, Oriana. And now we have a few comments to help the audience have a better experience. So just a few tips. So a bit of housekeeping. So make sure you are in gallery mode for the best view of the candidates during the debate. And you can change your view setting by clicking the top right-hand corner of the Zoom window and selecting gallery. And you can change from speaker to gallery. It will also help to be in full screen so you can see the candidates clearly throughout the call today. Please note that we have closed captioning for this webinar, and you do not have an option to turn this off. This debate is being recorded and will be shared via the HEN website and the HEN YouTube channel. Watch our social media channels for more information after the debate. And you will see a timekeeper on your screen. They will be holding up a yellow card for 30 seconds left to speak and a red card for when time is up. And this will help the candidates stay on track. And if you have a technical question, you can ask HEN as the host in the chat box, and you will hopefully get an answer to that very quickly. So I'm going to pass over the moderating to Cindy for the first questions.
Yes, jumping right in. If we can change the slide, please. The first question is on climate change. COVID-19 has showcased how interconnected we are in our global crisis, and it has shown how vulnerable our world can be, how people are affected by crisis differently, and how the populations can adapt and work together to protect the common good. With so much learned from addressing the COVID-19 pandemic, what lessons do you believe we should apply to the climate crisis, and how would you follow through with them if elected? We'll start with Jerome Adam, NDP. Jerome?
Thank you so much for the question. The main takeaway from the global response to COVID-19 should be the very fact that when global leaders are under pressure, the necessary action can take place. Vaccines were created and implemented globally. Now, the issue was apparent and livelihoods were at stake. And the same exact attitude needs to be addressed with climate change. The science is pointing to that. This needs to be reflected in our approach and positioning on the climate change on the global stage. Drastically ramping up current federal climate goals needs to be a must. And we're proud as NDPers of the massive role that we played in the passing of BC 12 because targets net zero emissions by 2050. But see, if we form government, our goals will be much more comprehensive. Our goal is to cut emissions by at least 50% by 2030, and we'll strengthen carbon pricing. We'll do this because we will strengthen carbon pricing to large corporations, ensure mandatory transparency on carbon risk for publicly traded companies, and oil and gas subsidies. The climate crisis is an existential threat, not one that we need to put off until 2050 like the Liberals imply, and especially not one we can put on forever like the Conservatives consistently show us. So the bold action that COVID-19 has proved we are capable of because of what we have fought for as the NDP, and we'll take that into government. Thank you so much for the question.
Cindy, you're on mute for that. If you
Sorry. That's the famous phrase of this past year. Anita, I'll ask you to respond to the question now, please.
Thanks so much. I led the federal team that procured more than 2.5 billion items of PPE, 50 million rapid tests, and over 70 million vaccines for Canada. Our government delivered vaccines for Canadians 2 months ahead of schedule. 85% of Canadians have had a single shot and 78% are double vaxxed. And we are the world leaders in vaccinations, indeed leading the G7 at the current time. We've donated 40 million vaccines and over $500 million to COVAX, the international pool procurement mechanism. Why do I say that? Because my experience in government and the process of procuring vaccines and assisting with Canada's vaccination effort has shown me that in government, we need to work together across parties and across countries to address the climate crisis. And that means taking action in Canada and abiding by our obligations internationally. We have to continue our efforts to fight climate change here at home. We have to abide by the Paris Agreement. And from vaccines to climate change, these are collective action problems that require collective action solutions. Since last September, our government has spent $53.6 billion towards a green recovery from the pandemic. For example, we're funding transit projects and home retrofits, including electric bus and charging station projects right here in Oakville. We're committed to achieving our 2030 climate target of reducing emissions by 40 to 45%. And this is in line where the science says we need to go. Yes, we have more work to do, but independent experts have agreed that our fully costed environmental plan is the most ambitious and feasible of all platforms. We have a real plan to fight climate change and protect our environment, and leading experts agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Now we'll go to JD Meany, PPC Party.
Thank you very much. COVID-19 has taught us a lot about lockdowns and how ineffective they have been. The failures that Trudeau's Liberal government have made lacked the idea of targeted support for the vulnerable populations, such as those in nursing homes. Having a full country in lockdown was harmful to many entrepreneurs, small businesses, and of course, jobs. Tens of thousands of small businesses have gone into bankruptcy because of lockdowns. Small businesses make up 97.9% of the economy in Canada, which is about 1.2 million businesses. Well under 1% of the population in Canada has died from COVID-19, which translates to 27,067 people. Let us be clear, their lives do matter, and so do the lives of people who were denied access to vulnerable surgeries. How many Canadians have died from cancer over the last 2 years? They have been denied access to important healthcare because COVID was considered to be more important as a political issue. In 2020, 83,300 died from cancer. Of course, healthcare professionals say you die with COVID rather than from COVID. How convenient, the numbers will continue to spike if you die with COVID. Are we now in a society where one's health problem is going to be promoted or demoted? Are we now creating a society based on health segregation? Why is having a vaccine passport a foolish territory to enter? Having a first-class citizen and a second-class citizen based on vaccination status. How many Canadians have died from other heart-related diseases? In the 80s, people all over the world were dying from AIDS and there was no vaccine available. There was no passports. We did not shut down. There are people I know who have survived COVID-19. In fact, all the survivors are living without long-term repercussions. I had the virus in April. Some doctors would argue that my antibodies are stronger than any vaccine available on the market. Myself and my party are fully against the concept of lockdowns for the virus and for a lockdown for climate change. Israel is one of the most double vaccinated countries in the world, with 40% of the new cases coming from vaccinated people. Why are we mandating a vaccine that does not prevent the virus from spreading? I am against lockdowns regardless of the reason.
Thank you very much for your answer. We'll move along to Oriana Knox, Green Party.
Thank you. So COVID exacerbated all the issues we already had in our country and made them more visible. The silver lining to lockdown and people being laid off of work was that it allowed people, myself included, to pay attention to the news and educate ourselves and watch documentaries to learn how to treat each other better. We need to take more responsibility for protecting the safety of each other, respecting essential workers by paying them what they deserve. Because when it comes down to it, they're the people that we demand to keep working while we're in a crisis. The CERB, what we learned from the CERB is that we need to implement a guaranteed livable income and transition to a green economy. The guaranteed livable income will give everyone a safety net, similar but better and more proportional than the CERB, so that no one ever has to risk falling into poverty, even if we happen to go into another pandemic again. That will put many, like myself, out of work 3 times for multiple months of the year. We need to transition to our green economy. We need to have healthier jobs for our people and our planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Oriana. We will move along to our second question on the debate. And the question is, we'll move along to the screen share. It's on resilience. In Canada and around the world, we have seen fires, extreme weather, droughts, infrastructure challenges, and more. The effects of climate change cannot be denied. All the while, our greenhouse gas emissions are still rising in Canada. How will you ensure we accelerate climate change mitigation, build resilient communities, and implement rapid, tangible solutions that include a just recovery for all Canadians? We'll start with Anita, a non-Liberal. Anita?
Thanks so much. We are committed to achieving 30% emissions reduction by 2030 and net zero by 2050. How are we going to do this? We're going to cap oil and gas emissions at current levels to ensure that they decline from now on. We're going to require half of new car sales to be zero emissions by 2030 and all by 2035. We're going to phase out fossil fuel subsidies faster and put the infrastructure in place to modernize transit, meaning that we will replace infrastructure that is not feasible and workable with the current system of transportation. Our government, for example, replaced diesel buses in Oakville with zero emission battery electric buses. We added 16 new electric buses to the fleet and installed 32 charging stations. These are concrete examples of our government's commitment to environmental sustainability and climate change right here in Oakville. We believe in funding infrastructure, and that's what we're doing. Building resilient communities also means that marginalized groups need to be part of the just recovery. We focused on supporting Canadians through the crisis, and we've recovered 92% of the jobs lost during COVID compared to 75% in the United States. The approach we have taken to healthcare, the environment, and affordable housing is central to ensuring a just recovery for everyone. We believe that it is possible to protect the environment and grow the economy. That's why we partnered with Ontario to invest $1.8 billion in the Ford Oakville plant to establish the first large-scale battery electric vehicle production by a major automaker in North America. This partnership secures jobs while helping to meet our climate goals. This is an example of the approach our government will continue to take, because developing the economy and ensuring environmental sustainability go hand in hand. Thank you.
We'll move along to JD Meany, PPC Party.
Thank you. I want to distinguish between the climate and the weather. The weather has freak occurrences such as floods, droughts, and tsunamis. Climate change has been part of our world history for over millions of years. We need a definitive scientific answer as to how much climate change is a result of people and their activities and how much of it is a natural occurrence. For example, we have had several ice ages. What I am in favor of is renewable nuclear energy. I am also in favor of the use of natural gas rather than burning coal. I'm in favor of using hemp as a building material. Did you know that hemp is highly insulative, fireproof, and non-toxic? It is sustainable. 1 acre of hemp is the equivalent to 10 acres of trees, and it grows much faster than trees. Saving our trees helps us to keep us carbon neutral as a country. The largest polluters in the world are Russia, China, and India, just to name a few. We need them to stop polluting when they are consistently always burning coal and other fuels that are harmful to the environment. Part of the PPC economic policy, which will solve environmental issues, we have created a competitive corporate tax rate of 10%, which will invite a green initial hub of free market to come to Canada. That will solve most of the problems for the world, and then we can export them. Liberals, NDP, and Conservatives are all in favor of carbon taxes. What does a carbon tax in Canada exactly do to help fight climate change? We are with the combination of CRB and other inflationary practices that Trudeau has done, we don't have enough money to be taken out of our pockets without adding another tax. We need sound solutions if we're going to get serious about real world problems, which require a real world solution. Thank you.
Thank you, JD. We'll move along to Oriana Knox, a Green Party.
Thank you. So we are the party that has had these policies all along. We're the only party with a plan to meet the Paris Climate Agreement goals. Canada is one of the worst greenhouse gas contributors, and we are also a country that feels the effects of climate change much more immediately, being an Arctic country. We need to stop subsidizing fossil fuels and instead put that money into renewable energy, improving public transit, supporting training programs for workers in oil, gas, and mining industries to renewable energies, implementing a guaranteed livable income to give people a safety net to also add another layer of protection while we transition to better jobs. We won't have the luxury to worry about anything else if our planet is dead. Thank you.
Thank you, Oriana. We'll move along to Jerome Adam, NDP. Jerome?
Thank you for the question. It's no secret that severe climate change will bring consequences to all of us. Even here in Oakville, a recent email to my campaign office actually pointed out, and I quote, that we are not so safe from dangerous events when wildfire smoke is so thick in my neighborhood and we were all advised to stay inside. And the email goes on to say later, this is not the future I want for my children or my grandchildren. And I agree. And that's why we need to fundamentally change the way that we all engage with climate change and the mitigation required to fight it. First and foremost, the NDP will prioritize a green transition in which no one is left behind, stopping federal oil and gas subsidies, providing new training for anyone in the oil and gas industries who is seeking new employment. And yes, a carbon tax, JD does reinvest it back into more green initiatives, okay? E-vehicle manufacturing, for example, and transitioning, like I said, those oil industry jobs, because they are transferable skills. We are for the creation of the Indigenous Guardians program. So often remote Indigenous communities are all on the front lines of these climate change catastrophes. The IGP will combine their traditional knowledge as land stewards with the modern climate science and disaster mitigation. We will spearhead this program. Finally, our strategy will fight against climate change will extend to every household in Canada, providing funds for green retrofit programs, private households, and all crown corporations and government buildings. We can fight climate change without breaking the bank for average families. It's time to make large corporations pay for the damage that they're doing and not all the rest of us create a future in which our children can thrive. Thank you so much for the question.
Thank you very much, candidates, for the answers to these first two questions.
All right, thanks, Cindy. So we're moving on to questions from our partners. So the next slide is a question from CFUW, and it's a question around women workers in Canada earned an average of 76.8 cents for every dollar earned by men in 2019, as reported by the Canadian Women's Foundation. How will your party ensure that the federal pay equity legislation is implemented to close the gender gap? Starting this round is JD Meany. JD?
Thank you for the question. So we obviously live in a very modern society, and women and men should be treated equally in the workforce, socially. I don't even know why we're still having conversations in 2021 about this. I don't really see how this is still a problem at this point. This should have been addressed a long time ago with previous governments. Obviously, this is something that the PPC will definitely address, and we will close that gender gap for pay equity. So I don't really know what else we can really tell you at this point, but that is something that's definitely going to have to be addressed.
Thanks, JD. Next, answering the question is Oriana Knox. Oriana?
Okay, thank you very much. On the topic of women being paid less, there is another smaller issue in that may not affect everyone, but one of the issues that is really important to me and that disproportionately affects women and marginalized groups, also for income, is labor trafficking. It is little talked about, but I want to use my time here to bring it to your attention. One big step in the right direction would be to decriminalize sex work and create regulations around it that allow people to get the help they need while allowing those who use it as their chosen profession to do so safely. This is a big one for women in general, and particularly trans women and Black and Indigenous and people of color. When people are trafficked, that is a crime, but there is many people in different types of sex work, prostitution in particular, that choose it, and currently under Bill C-36, all of these people are all being treated as victims, and that's not right. Sex workers still live and work under a criminal regime. In March 2021, the Canadian Alliance for Sex Work Law Reform, which represents 25 groups that work with members of the sex trade, launched a constitutional challenge in the Ontario Superior Court of Justice. They argue the laws violate provisions of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and have launched a constitutional challenge to most of the sex work provisions that were implemented in the 2014 under the Protection for Communities and Exploited Persons with Bill C-36 that was brought in under Stephen Harper. And after 2 terms, the Liberals have yet to take action regarding Bill C-36. And so one of the ways we can breach the pay equality issue is to let women and other minority groups be able to make the money how they see fit and safely. Thank you.
Thanks, Oriana. Next, Jerome Adamo from the NDP party. Jerome?
Yeah, sorry, I was just getting my jacket out that says my union, because I am an early childhood educator and it's a predominantly female dominated profession, just as PSW is, and nurses, and all those essential workers that we were talking about throughout the COVID-19. The NDP's plan with respect to gender equity, not just with respect to jobs, but we have to remember domestic abuse leave, childcare, murdered and missing Indigenous women reports, providing women's health and reproductive rights, all of that. But yes, let's get back to that pay inequity, because I see it every day. I see it every day in a profession that I do. And we're trying to roll out a universal childcare program 50 years after a Royal Commission has said that number one barrier to employment for women is childcare. So in 2008, it was sad that the Stephen Harper, actually we still have a vigil every year for that, and the Liberals are trying to bring it in, but they should have brought it in 2015. If it was so tragic back then that Stephen Harper cut it, you should have implemented it the first time around in 2015, because that's what needed to be done, and that's what the Royal Commission is telling us to do. So essential workers, we need to talk about pay equity. We got to talk about that minimum wage standard all across Canada of $20 an hour, okay? And that is going to bring people out of poverty, because again, 1989 again was a long time ago, and everybody stood up back then in the House of Commons to eradicate poverty as well. So we need to address these, and we need to address these strongly. But again, the paid sick leave, that's a problem. Trudeau, Justin, Singh asked you months and months ago, and you kept saying that it wasn't in the federal government's power, but now he has said in August that it is in his power. So for the paid sick leave. So I don't know. It's a little bit cynical politics.
All right, thanks, Jerome. And then next speaker, Anita Anand, the Liberal Party. Anita?
Thanks so much, Darla. This is a very important issue for me as a feminist and as a woman who has fought for women's equality and the equality of visible minorities all my life. Our government passed Bill C-65 to further prevent violence and harassment in federally regulated workplaces. We also passed proactive pay equity legislation, which, as the question implies, will ensure that women will be equally compensated for work of equal value. We passed pay transparency legislation to close the gender wage gap, and we're committed to investing $30 billion to create $10 per day early learning and childcare. We have negotiated agreements with 10 provinces thus far. We are working very hard on finalizing agreements with the other provinces. Why? Because women have suffered disproportionately as a result of this pandemic. Women are bearing the brunt of staying home to take care of their kids, having to leave their jobs, and we believe that this is a priority. This is what motivated us to introduce $10 a day childcare, and we hope that it will become law across the country once the last remaining provinces sign on. So once again, I appreciate this question. It is at the heart of who I am as an individual, a woman, and a racial minority. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Anita. That closes that round of questions. So if we could have the slide up for the next question. The next question is about childcare. So the current government has childcare agreements with several provinces. How would your party honor those agreements and work with the remaining provinces to develop similar agreements for accessible, affordable, and inclusive childcare for all families? All right, so that's the question. And we're going to start with Oriana Knox from the Green Party. Oriana?
Thank you. So the Greens are committed to a high quality federally funded childcare program in Canada, accessible to any family that wants to place children into early childhood education. Workplace childcare has been shown to improve productivity, decrease employee absenteeism, ensure quality care for children, because parents can drop in at any time to see their young children, and permit longer breastfeeding for infants. Workplace childcare spaces create other benefits. Emerging literature indicates small children benefit enormously from time with their mothers, especially when very young. The Liberals have promised the $10 a day childcare, but they have not laid out how they will do it. UNICEF recommends a National Children's Commissioner to be created to better coordinate services across the country and advocate for children. So the Green Party advocates the creation of such a position. We want to ensure the universal childcare program provides the workplace childcare spaces where possible, providing a direct tax credit to employers or groups of them in small businesses of $1,500 per child per year. And also we can also reduce the need for childcare by fixing our commuting times to and from work. Fixing transport commuting time to cut down, it will cut down the solution and will fix multiple problems. Holistically, all the time parents spend commuting to and from work is time they could be spending with their children. We want to incentivize babysitter programs and figure out a way to have some regulated kind of forum so that people can find babysitters near them that they know that they can trust with their children. Thank you.
Thanks, Oriana. Next is Jerome Adamo from the NDP. Jerome?
Yeah, I think I showed my colors earlier during the day. I guess it's pink for my union and my industry and my profession as a childcare worker, because I do wear my heart on my sleeve. I congratulate the advocates from the childcare advocacy groups, Childcare Advocacy Association and the Association of Early Childhood Educators here in Ontario. Done a lot of great work. So this seems to be a very good victory, very well rewarded victory, this rollout. However, I'm a little worried. And why is because I think as a labor activist, I'm always on the lookout for working conditions. And we spoke about pay equity earlier, and the fact that lack of investment. So recently, it has been already shown to the Liberal government that with respects to new social distancing measures, we've had to reduce our capacity in our childcare centers. So that is going to need required investment. And I'm not going to go into the failed promises of 1970 ignoring the Royal Commission or Stephen Harper again, but again, in 2015 you could have taken it right away. I know you weren't there, Anita, but I don't know why the Liberals didn't do it. And sometimes they're always talking about positively something just before an election. So what as an MP, the Quebec and Manitoba models are successful and sustainable. $10 a day. I will maintain this position for a rollout here in Oakville by advocating against any block that the Ford government might take any of this program, because we have seen money from the federal government go to the Ontario government and it gets blocked, and that's not something. And he'll pay his price next June, but this is right now. And the fact is that I, as an advocate for Oakville, I will not, and I will make sure that it will not be blocked at a provincial level. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jerome. Next, Anita Anand, Liberal.
Okay, this picks up on my response from the previous question, and I just want to start by saying that every child deserves the best possible start in life. I'm a mother of 4 children. I had 4 children under the age of 5 when the final one was born, and I fully understand how important childcare is, and I was fully supportive of our government's endeavors in our budget and in our platform to commit to $10 a day childcare. The reality is that we need the provinces each on side in order to implement them in their jurisdictions. We have 10 provinces that have signed on thus far, and we are very close to finalizing with the remainder. And I will just say that our government's commitment in our budget to implement $10 a day childcare is transformative. And it indeed recognizes the important role that women play in our economy. It is no surprise that this was introduced by Chrystia Freeland, the first woman finance minister in the history of this country. We are the party that furthers women's concerns and women's equality, and we will continue to do that. And $10 a day childcare is an important step to building back better after this very difficult pandemic and ensuring that women have a role in Canada's economic future. Thank you.
Thanks, Anita. And next, JD Meany, PPC.
Thank you. I'll tell you exactly how you beat $10 a day childcare. With our tax plan, up to $100,000, your first $15,000 will be tax exempt. Over 2 years, that's $30,000 that you'll be receiving that is tax exempt. Add that to whatever province you live in. So here in Ontario, obviously. So that amount of money, you can use that in the way that you best suits your lifestyle. I don't know how much childcare is going to cost you personally, or if you're commuting or whatever you're going to use that for. But that is a lot of money that you can use towards your own necessities. That's for 100,000, 15%. If you're a business owner, it'll be 10% if you're incorporated. That is completely fair. We're not picking winners or losers here. We're not siding with the big banks or a big corporation over a mom and pop business. We have the most pro-Canadian, pro-family plan for Canada, and it's the People's Party of Canada that's going to execute on that. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, JD. We're moving on to the next question. So if we could share that question on the screen, please. All right, so how would your party address poverty, violence, and other inequities experienced by marginalized women? So that's the next question, and we're starting with Jerome in this round. Jerome Adamo, NDP. And you're on mute, Jerome.
I should know that, being an educator. One of the first things is I forgot to say earlier is it is documented that 100,000 women lost their jobs, or not lost their jobs, had to leave their jobs during the pandemic. So that's one thing. But when we specifically addressing poverty and addressing the fact that everything under affordability, healthcare, phone, electricity, housing, childcare, all of that. So let's just talk about what Jagmeet Singh will do to tackle poverty in Canada, affordable childcare, obviously, but we are going to bring in a guaranteed basic income. It was working here in Ontario, just as the science, evidence-based science was suggesting, the guaranteed basic income is going to be brought into Canada. The thing is the Liberals are starting to talk about it, but the Liberals and Conservatives have a history of talking positively about something just before elections. And they seem to, and the Liberals specifically like to campaign on the left and sound a little bit like the NDP. But then when they get into government, they start talking and they start setting policies and start siding so absolutely there's a travesty with havens and everything else, because we need to make sure that we implement the wealth tax and have a fair taxation system, because we need to make sure that we understand that part of the struggle that people have, women, everybody, is the fact that because we're paying more than what we should be paying because more people are not paying their fair share. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jerome. Next, we'll hear from Anita Anand, Liberal. Anita?
Thanks so much for the question. Let me just tell you that we have, as a government, launched the gender-based violence strategy, committing nearly $200 million starting in 2017, 2018, and that funding goes through to 22 and 23, and over $40 million per year on an ongoing basis. We created a $100 million feminist response and recovery fund in order to address marginalized women, racialized women, inequities that occurred during the pandemic. And in 2021, we committed $601 million towards a national action plan to end gender-based violence. So we are deeply committed to ending gender-based violence, and we are fully recognizing the plight of marginalized women. The question also refers to racialized minorities. And in particular, as the Minister of Procurement, I have been focused on federal contracting and ensuring that Black businesses and Indigenous women-led businesses have access to federal contracts. I launched 10 pilot projects for Black businesses while I was the minister, and I also ensured that we passed a mandate for all federal departments to work towards a minimum of 5% federal contracting going to Indigenous businesses. So the desire and the policy in order to protect marginalized women and racialized women is a priority for me personally, as well as our government. Our platform states that, and I personally am committed to it each and every day that I serve. Thank you.
Thanks, Anita. So I'll just repeat the question for the next two speakers. Same question. How would your party address poverty, violence, and other inequities experienced by marginalized women? So our next speaker is JD Meany, PPC.
Thank you. So let's talk about broken promises. So Justin Trudeau, broken promises for Indigenous communities. Indigenous women are murdered. I think that it's time that the Liberals need to deliver on providing them with clean drinking water. 30 communities that are without clean drinking water. Lots of problems that are going on there. Why have they been left behind as long as they have been? It's something that does need to be addressed. Our party will take care of this problem. We will not leave Indigenous communities behind. Women, men, Indigenous of any type. Again, the question asked about poverty. So I addressed that a little bit in the last question there. The first 15,000 will be tax exempt. That applies to everyone across the board. It's up to a maximum of $100,000 income. I'm not a person that earns over six figures like Anita and a few other people as well. So for someone like myself and a lot of millennials, they could definitely benefit from that. Indigenous women and all sorts of groups will definitely benefit from that. Thank you.
All right, thanks, JD. And Oriana Knox from the Green Party. Oriana?
Thank you. Sorry, could you just repeat it one more time?
I was just about to do that anyway. So the question is,
perfect.
That's okay. How would your party address poverty, violence, and other inequities experienced by marginalized women?
Okay, thank you. So also, like I was saying earlier, and it does have in regards with the violence towards women and the sex workers that are disproportionately also, like I said, the Black, Indigenous, and women of color are disproportionately affected by that. We want to reform the sex work laws in Canada with a clear focus on harm reduction, given the dangers that sex trade workers face. Legalizing the industry will allow sex workers to access law enforcement and social services when needed. We need to increase funding of community organizations, providing services to those driven to sex work by economic deprivation. Ensure fair and unbiased treatment towards sex workers and promote sex worker safety, dignity, and well-being. Encourage an equitable and non-discriminatory approach with all individuals engaged in the sex industry. Mitigate negative impacts of sex work on the workers, residents, and neighborhoods. Promote safe environments for all residents and neighborhoods. And build positive relationships with individuals and businesses engaged in the industry and individuals, businesses, and neighborhoods impacted by it. The Green Party also wants to see better treatment for women and marginalized groups in medical settings. Too often, women and people of color are dismissed and or overlooked when they come into medical professionals that they trust with their concerns. It is long known in history that even experiments on birth control were only tested on male bodies, and also the other tests and things that were going on to Indigenous and people of color in history. In addition to that, the Green Party of Canada reaffirms its support for the implementation of the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the final report of the National Inquiry of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. And for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, we need to get the 21 parts of that have not had any steps taken completed, as well as the 60 left that have had some steps but not been totally completed. Thank you.
Thanks, Oriana. Okay, we have one more question in this round before where you, the participants, get to vote and pick the top two. So one more question. So if we could move to the slide. All right, so here's the question. What is your party's plan to create and implement enforceable national standards for long-term care in Canada? So it's a question about long-term care. What is your party's plan to create and implement enforceable national standards for long-term care in Canada? And we'll start this round with Anita Anand, Liberal.
So the greatest tragedy of our pandemic, and indeed the first wave of the pandemic, was the inordinate number of deaths in long-term care homes. And what our government did, given the area of jurisdiction that we have, is to assist the provinces. We sent in the armed forces to Quebec and Ontario when asked. We provided $25 billion in total to the provinces so that they could use some of that money for long-term care. And we committed in our fall economic statement and our budget to develop national standards for long-term care. But we have to remember that long-term care is within provincial jurisdiction. So we need to make sure that we develop those national standards, as we're committing to do, but it will be up to the provinces to implement them. That's why we need to continue to work with the provinces across the board on all of these very important initiatives: long-term care, $10 a day childcare, green emissions and carbon reduction. We need to continue to build those relationships with the provinces in order to operate within our constitutional jurisdiction, but also deliver outcomes for Canadians. That has been my goal as a member of Parliament, to work across party lines, to work across levels of government, to make sure we get things done, including in the area of long-term care. Thank you.
Thanks, Anita. Our next speaker is JD Meany, PPC.
Thank you. So the Trudeau Liberals failed once again when it came to COVID-19, allowing many vulnerable, including seniors, to die in long-term care facilities. We need to make sure this never happens again, as this is a disgrace, as we are Canadians, and this should have never happened. We need to always make sure that the federal government is working with the provincial government to provide what is needed for the long-term care facilities. I would never stand for anything that Justin Trudeau allowed to happen to them. So I hope this never happens again. Thank you.
All right, and the next speaker, Oriana Knox, Green Party. Oriana.
Thank you. So the Green Party, a Green government, will bring long-term care under the Canada Health Act. Universal care will ensure that every person in long-term care in Canada has access to quality, affordable care. We want to improve the quality of care in long-term facilities, create enforceable national standards for long-term care, provide transformative investment for seniors care, including infrastructure and staffing funding, require emergency and pandemic preparedness for long-term care, including providing proper and adequate supplies of PPE and testing for COVID-19 for staff, family caregivers, and residents, set a national standard of 4 hours of regulated care per day for each long-term care resident, enforce national standards of care through accountability and penalties, including criminal prosecution, ensure safe family access to long-term care facilities, and provide all needed vaccinations to all residents, staff, and caregivers for long-term care, not only COVID-19, but also influenza, pneumonia, diphtheria, whooping cough, etc. And in general, I just wanted to say in healthcare in general, we don't really have much of a healthcare system. We have an illness treatment system. We don't encourage people to take care of themselves and instead just treat their illnesses that they develop over time. So I think in addition to these things the Green Party would do, I think we also need to focus our attention on emphasizing prevention over treatment so people will have longer, healthier lives. Thank you.
Thanks, Oriana. And next speaker is Jerome Adamo, NDP. Jerome.
Yeah, so earlier Anita implied that, of course, there's going to be cooperation with the provinces, and I'm a little worried because of sometimes the regressive policies of some of the provincial governments. So I'm pretty sure that that can be regulated by targeted payments to the provinces, which set standards on how much has to be invested into long-term care facilities. But I'm more interested, like the investments into, for example, emergency preparedness or increased pay, because increased pay is going to attract a quality workforce for that. And I need to say to all parties, the NDP is saying no corporations, no privatization of long-term care facilities. But let's get back to what we were talking about. We're talking about the fact that the governments previously, both Liberal and Conservatives, have not been prepared to deal with Canada's aging population. And that's the thing. The old age security inequities, pension instabilities, and things like that, that these people do actually have right in their face, and of course, cell phone bills and everything else that's adding to the affordability issue our seniors are going through, as well as this threat to long-term care. And it is a threat. Okay, privatization of any kind of healthcare is a threat, whether or not it's taking pharmacare and eroding it and taking medication out of their mouths, or not providing the proper bed care in long-term care facilities or hospitals. So absolutely, the NDP is on the side of people, and we have the history to prove that we're always fighting for people. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Jerome. And that brings this round to a close. We're going to now ask the audience to select which will be the final two questions before we go into closing statements. So these questions came from the community that were sent in over the last week or so, and these are the top questions that we have. So the audience will have a chance to vote. On the screen, you'll see a live poll, and there are 5 options to choose from, and the top 2 will be selected. So I'll read them out as you're getting a chance to select 2, and you can pick up to 2 choices in your voting. So the first one is: every citizen and every party needs to be mobilized to fight the climate crisis. How will you work across the partisan divide to do this? Question 2, how will your party strike a balance between health, employment, the economy, and the environment? Question 3, as more plans are created for urban expansion, how will your party ensure that our green spaces are protected while providing affordable housing? Question 4, what actions would your party take considering projected population growth and increasing demands on food systems to ensure food security and other determinants of health, such as access to healthy food options, healthcare, etc., to build more sustainable communities? Or question 5, what are the immediate actions you would like to see happen to address the climate crisis? So I understand that the host and panelists cannot vote, but those of you in the audience, please cast your votes and submit your ballots. Very excited to see which 2 questions come up to the top. So the Zoom poll should be open. You select the 2 questions that you would like the candidates to answer next, and the Zoom poll should pop up on your computer. Select the questions you would like to vote for. Katrina, are we getting results in?
Nothing is coming in, and it makes me worried that potentially the poll is not working. If you are able to see that poll in front of you, oh, it said it was closed. Interesting. I might relaunch the poll and try again. Give me 1 second.
Okay. All right, well, thanks. We got some good feedback here from the audience. Thanks for the comments. Let's see if we can get this to work again. Okay.
I have just relaunched the poll, and I see people are answering, so that's much better than before. Thank you, everyone. I'll keep the poll open for just in another minute or so, just so everybody can answer. I will pass the top 2 questions on to Darla and Cindy to ask the candidates.
So just as those results are coming in, we will have 2 questions, and the first speaker in this round will be JD, and then there'll be the second question will be asked, and then we'll move into closing statements from the participants. So, all right. Well, that feels like we've had the poll out for a while. What do you think, Katrine? Can we close the poll?
Yep, I can close the poll now.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I feel like we should have a drum roll or something as these questions come up. All right, so we're waiting to see what the results are.
Yes, give me 1 second to bear with me as I move from one screen to the next screen. I'll have those questions for you in a second.
Excellent. Well, it gives the panelists an opportunity to get their thoughts together. It'll be 2 of these 5 questions, so we're narrowing it down a little bit. Okay, so here I have the question. All right, so the first question in this final round, what are the immediate actions you would like to see happen to address the climate crisis? So this is a climate crisis question. That's question 5 on this list.
So as I spoke about before, we want to have practical solutions to help fight pollution. I've heard the notion before that Canada is the largest polluter with a carbon footprint. I reject that notion. I do believe that it is China, Russia, and India who are the greatest polluters in the world. We are carbon neutral. With the amount of resources that we have, I think it's very important that we protect our environment. We should focus on making our soil better, our water better. As I said earlier, providing that drinkable water for our Indigenous communities. We need to work together with different nations to make sure that they are also doing their part, but we can't be babysitting them. So we need to get away from this idea. The Paris Accord is not sustainable. And I think that we should draw new boundaries about how we are going to actually accomplish this correctly. So right now, it's not there. We could start off by creating that environmental hub, 10% corporate tax, starting to use hemp. I think these are the most basic solutions we can focus on in the short term. Thank you.
All right, thanks, JD. Next, Oriana Knox, Green Party. Oriana?
Thank you. So the steps that the Green Party would want to do for climate change is a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions of 60% from the 2005 levels by 2030, with enforceable targets in place for by 2023, making us the only party to meet the Paris Agreement goals. 100% of Canadian electricity from renewables by 2030, and a national east-west energy corridor. End all extraction of fossil fuels, cancel all pipeline projects, cancel all oil exploration projects, including offshore, ban fracking, phase out existing oil and gas operations between 2030 and 2035. All federal investment funds, such as the Canada Pension Plan, must divest from fossil fuels. Introduce a Just Transition Act with planned transitions towards a decarbonized economy, investments in clean tech, and incentivize green investments, such as raising taxes on environmentally harmful goods and services. Beginning in 2022 up to 2030, increase carbon taxes by $25 tons per year. Current level is at $50. Planned increase is $15 per year under the Liberal plan. Carbon border adjustment, a tariff on goods coming into Canada from countries without strong emissions reduction policies. Green retrofit programs, including changing the National Building Code to require all new constructions and major renovations must meet net zero standards by 2030. Ban sale of internal combustion passenger vehicles by 2030. Protect a minimum of 30% of fresh waters and lands in Canadian ecosystems by 2030 and 50% by 2050. And in addition to that, ending the 51 remaining water advisories in the First Nations that allegedly were supposed to be lifted by March of this year. And I would just like to say, we are not the worst contributor of carbon emissions, but we are one of the worst. And again, we are one of the most affected countries by it, being an Arctic country. Thank you.
Thanks, Oriana. Next, we'll have Jerome Adamo, NDP. Jerome.
I appreciate the question. And tonight, being here, because I meet with most of these people that I might be watching tonight. Oakville has some great advocates with climate. There's Grandmothers Act to Save the Planet, Council of Canadians, which I'm a member of, and I've sat many times with many of the people that actually put together this thing, this debate tonight. Thank you so much for that. But yes, keeping limiting our climate warming to 1.5 degrees is absolutely a must. And I'm proud to promote and stand confidently behind the NDP multi-billion-dollar plan. Why? Because it's a green energy plan that promotes an economy creating 600,000 green jobs, targets to power Canada with net carbon-free electricity by 2030. As I said earlier, we do want to move towards non-emitting electricity by 2050, but forming government is very different, and ambition, and when there's collective will, you set priority. Home energy cost saving incentives for people, cleaner and more affordable public transit, e-vehicles, e-buses, home upgrade incentives, low interest loans for retrofits, insulation, windows, and everything else. We spoke about the Indigenous Care Guardians program earlier. The stewardship and traditional knowledge of Canada's First Nations people should be the guiding factor of anything when it comes to our climate mitigation for this crisis. We look at making sure that we can train them, and we use that sensitive ear to them because they're going to guide us and we're not going to guide them. And we have to look at constant failed promises. Just before elections, we're told this is what we're going to do. And then after the election, the story is different. This is why I run. This is why I run. And this is why I'll be seeing you guys in future meetings as well.
Thanks, Jerome. And next we'll have Anita Anand, Liberal. Anita.
Thanks a lot. Look, it is misleading to tell Canadians that we can magically eliminate 50% or more of our GHG emissions in just 9 years without enormous cost and disruption in our labor markets, especially for certain workers and groups. And so what our plan seeks to do is to make sure that we have a workable reduction in GHG emissions while maintaining jobs and transitioning to a green economy. The Liberal government is committed to achieving our 2030 climate target of reducing emissions by 40 to 45% of 2005 levels, which is in line with where the science says we need to go. And we will reach net zero by 2050. And we have a plan, a practical plan to reach those targets. How? Cap oil and gas emissions at current levels to ensure that they decline from now on. Require half of new car sales to be zero emissions by 2030 and all by 2035. And phase out fossil fuel subsidies faster. This is a credible plan. Independent analysts are giving the Liberals a grade of 8 out of 10, while the NDP received a 2 out of 10. And the Conservative plan, although the candidate is not here, would take us backward to the Harper era, complete with Harper's climate target. We have a plan and the determination to significantly cut emissions while transitioning to a green economy. The Ford plant transaction that I described earlier to move production to zero emission vehicles, making Ford a leader in North America, is just one example of how we can move forward together, protecting our environment and transitioning to a green economy while saving jobs. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Anita. Now over to Cindy for the next question.
Yes, the next question that came in the top of the poll for the candidates to answer is: every citizen and every party needs to be mobilized to fight the climate crisis. How will you work across the partisan divide to do this? We'll start first with Oriana Knox, Green Party. Oriana?
Thank you. So we are the first party to proposition a cross-party coalition, and we should all work together because this affects all of us. The Green Party has always supported the electoral reform, and the federal matters impacting the Halton region arise, we will support the position. I wish to represent the wishes of my constituents, and that follows from one of the 6 Green Party values. We will work across party lines to solve this crisis, and the Green Party has all of the steps that we need to do to solve this. And I know people can talk about, oh, these things are going to cost too much money or destroy our economy or something, but I want to ask you, can we afford not to? How much is it going to cost us if we don't make these changes? So I would like to have everyone work together, because we're all working for the same country when it comes down to it. And it's not just our planet, it's our health, it's our livelihoods, it's our jobs and our futures that is at stake. And we should be able to all be one team as Canadians to solve this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Ariana. We'll move along to Jerome Adomo, NDP.
Thank you. I know the question is not about fair elections, but we have to work across the lines, and we have to take advantage and look at what we learned the last 18 months of a minority government, and look at the past, because minority government brought healthcare to us too. So the NDP is used to, I mean, remember, Tommy Douglas is voted the greatest Canadian because he did go over party lines on another issue, universal healthcare. So the NDP right now has for years been extending our hand to the Liberals and the Conservatives on our climate plan. And what ends up happening is you'll Google so many times when the Conservatives and the Liberals have had each other's backs, and they've had each other's backs for each other's friends, and I call like these groups that I referenced earlier, those are my friends because I work for them. But you want to know if I'm walking across party lines, I'm already doing it. My job title changes after September 20th. Not my job, because I've been working with climate action groups I'm a member of Council of Canadians. I work with these people on a regular basis, and I probably even have in my Google Calendar scheduled events or meetings with them after the 20th. If I win, I have to send my regrets. I'll just let you know. But the fact of the matter is I've already started working, and I've already started going past those party lines, because let's figure, we have Liberals and we have Conservatives and NDPs in the Council of Canadians. We are a non-partisan organization, and we all come together because we all are intelligent minds at the end of the day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jerome. We'll move along to Anita Anand, Liberal. Anita?
Thank you. Thank you so much. I have just served for almost 2 years in a minority government, and I am fully cognizant of the need to work across partisan lines in order to get legislation passed. And that's exactly what our government has done over the course of the past 2 years, whether it relates to environmental legislation or legislation relating to financial supports for Canadians. If we get reelected, we are going to introduce strengthened legislation to protect our environment called the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. And we are going to recognize for the first time in federal law a right to a healthy environment. That is going to require our Minister of the Environment to examine the link between race, socioeconomic status, and exposure to environmental risk. It is also going to require our government to work across party lines if we do not win a majority in order to make sure that we get this legislation passed. So the key in any government is to work together across partisan lines to get legislation and Canadians at large on side. But it's not simply a matter of federal government work that we need to do. As an MP, I have learned that we need to work with other levels of government. In this Oakville riding with MPP Stephen Crawford, for example, and with Mayor Rob Burton at the municipal level in order to get things done. And we have been able to work together. The Ford plan is one example. I also was leading a contract for the production of N95 masks in Brockville. We partnered with the government of Ontario, the Conservative government of Ontario, to get that contract off the ground. So I have knowledge of negotiation and the need to work across party lines, and I will bring that again to the government if reelected. Thank you.
Thanks, Anita. We'll move along to JD Meany, PPC.
Thank you. The question, how I interpret it, is about cooperation with different levels of government and also with different political parties. I think it shows a lot about the content of the character of the candidate who would be elected if they're able to cooperate and work together, even with groups that they don't agree with. What constituents need to remind themselves of is that you may not feel totally represented by your candidate because they may be affiliated with a party. I am represented by some of the constituents of Oakville, though some of them may not agree with me. And the same goes for Mr. Adamo, Ms. Anon, and Ms. Knox. It's very disappointing that the Conservative candidate is not here today. I think that shows a lot about the content and the character of the Conservative Party of Canada, that they're not showing up to the 100 debates on the environment. Not everyone may agree with our environmental policy, but we do have one, and we do want what is best for Canadians. We want to work together with all groups and all levels of government to make sure that we do what is best for Canada, because it's time we stop putting the UN ahead of Canada, and it's time we put Canada first. So I'm just saying I'm very disappointed that we will not have another opportunity to debate together. And I think that Maxime Bernier needs to be heard by many Canadians. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all the candidates for answering all of these important questions for us tonight. It's very important for the constituencies to hear your answers. And now we're going to move to a section of the debate where as candidates, you'll be able to provide a very brief closing statement. And it will be very brief. We will start in the order of Jerome Adamo, NDP. Jerome?
Friends, New Democrats are different because we have a history of working for people. We have fought for better all of our existence, because we lift people up. Setting Canadians up for success with a green and just recovery benefits us all. New innovations, transferable skills training, regional emergency preparedness, jobs leading to a green economy, safe water, lots of trees, and a prosperous wildlife. The past is full of stories of neglect from both Conservatives and Liberal while in power, coming up with the right things just before an election, but never intending on delivering them. We don't forget that both the Liberals and Conservatives protected billion-dollar corporations during the pandemic, which paid no taxes, and they also gave billions of dollars to the biggest polluters like it was some kind of reward. And both parties' neglect made things worse and not better, protecting their friends. See, Jagmeet Singh and the NDP have a record of fighting for you. And we say friends when we're referring to you, because it is you that we work for. Let the Liberals and the Conservatives have their friends, because I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in how I can better impact your life here in Oakville. On September 20th, I hope that you will consider voting for me to be your next member of parliament, to represent this beautiful town. Why? Because I fight for you every day. I have fought for you every day, and I will continue to fight for you every single day. That is my pledge. Thank you so very much for coming out tonight and listening to all of us.
Thank you, Jerome. We'll move along to Anita Anand, Liberal. Anita?
Merci beaucoup, Cindy, et merci pour cet événement. C'était très, très plaisir d'être ici avec vous aujourd'hui. I have lived in Oakville for 18 years. I've raised my 4 kids here and our 3 dogs, and we walk Oakville's beautiful trails every single day and are taken back by the beauty around us in this town. But I, like many of you, look at our future, and I'm concerned about what lies ahead for the next generations to come. Our climate plan requires every sector to reduce pollution while creating new jobs and attracting investments in new technology. We've invested $100 billion to reduce pollution since 2015, and our actions to date will achieve a 36% reduction by 2030. We have more work to do, but we cannot turn our back on the environmental progress we have made or disengage from global targets like the Paris Agreement to limit global warming. We also need to have a sincere and, may I emphasize, realistic platform in place, which is what independent experts have said about the Liberals' fully costed plan. Our plan includes eliminating fossil fuel subsidies, and we are committing to do so by 2023. We will also develop a plan to phase out public financing of the fossil fuel sector, including in crown corporations, a topic I did not hear my opponents discuss this evening at all. We have made the 2 largest investments in nature conservation in Canadian history, and we are committed to protecting at least 30% of land, freshwater, and ocean by 2030. When we came into government, Canada had protected less than 1% of our oceans. We are now at 14%. In closing, we have miles to go before we sleep, to paraphrase the poet Robert Frost, but we cannot turn back. We must stick to the plan of reaching net zero by 2050. Our plan is ambitious. It is supported by the Globe and Mail editorial board, as well as independent experts such as Professor Mark Jacquard and the previous Green Party of BC leader. I urge you to come with me so that we can tackle this urgent problem together.
Thanks, Anita. Sorry. We're just watching our timing. Thanks very much. We'll move along to JD Meany, PPC. JD.
Thank you. What you'll expect from me as your MP. I want Canadians everywhere to live in a clean environment. I want their drinking water to be the best quality possible. I want our soil to be the best quality to harvest for our crops. I want our nature to thrive. Whatever is taken from our natural resources for any means of production, 2 more units should be put right back in. I want our strongest emphasis to be focused on pollution and how we can make everyone do their part. I'm a strong believer in composting and recycling. I'm a strong advocate for hemp as a means of production. I want to leave our planet in better shape than I was brought into it. I want to commit to issues that are practicable within reason that will help our environment. I want to do this with practice in mind that will not harm other Canadians or damage their standard of living. I want our Indigenous communities to be looked after and that they feel safe wherever they choose to live. I want to tolerate the government, and private industry should be punished for polluting. Same thing with our government. If they pointlessly pollute, it should never be tolerated. I want to make it an effort that it can be a larger initiative to build an environmental hub in Canada, which will be competitive for private industry to help solve many of the issues around pollution. If I am your MP, I will protect Canadians, our economy, and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, JD. We'll move along to Oriana Knox, Green Party.
Thank you. The climate change is a pressing global issue. If we do not keep global warming within 1.5 degrees Celsius above the global average temperature, we risk triggering runaway heating and an already warm and a climate catastrophe. The Earth has already warmed 1 degree Celsius on average, while Canada has warmed by 2 degrees Celsius and the Arctic by 3 to 4 degrees Celsius. This level of warming is already producing unprecedented heat waves, polar ice melting, flooding, extreme storms, and forest fires. We must treat climate change as the crisis it is. If the government thinks it's an emergency, then it must start acting like it. The problem is that its actions are undermined by its own people. Early this year, it was revealed that a deputy minister in Natural Resources Canada described his department as being the oil industry's voice in the government. And it was shown how ministers in that department were actually fighting against Environment Canada and lobbying against its changes, as if the oil industry didn't already have enough clout in this government. As COVID has shown us, it is possible for governments and people to turn quickly to face challenges. It may not be as quick as turning on a dime, but it's close. If we are to take this seriously, then all members of the government, even its civil servants, have to act like it's an emergency. And we do need to hold the big corporations accountable for their emissions and how they package and process and create their items for the Canadians. And they deserve to have to follow guidelines and reduce these wastes while not passing the buck down to the consumers. So again, my name is Oriana Knox, and on September 20th, dare to do better, vote green. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cindy, you're on mute again.
Yes, thank you. Toggling off and on here. Thank you very much for all the candidates for their closing remarks. And again, thank you very much for committing your time this evening for participating in the debate. Thank you as the audience for being a part of the 100 debates on the environment and more this evening. Thank you for all the candidates and their teams. We appreciate your support this evening. We show much gratitude to our partners, GreenPAC, CFUW Oakville, CFUW Georgetown, Sustainable Milton, Halton Hills Public Library, and participation from Burlington Green as well in the other debates being hosted tonight in partnership. We truly appreciate all the support and for helping us organize tonight's debate. I would also like to thank my co-moderator, Darla Campbell, and our timekeeper, Ann Douglas, for their work. And on behalf of the entire team at HEN, thank you for your time this evening. And please stay connected to HEN and our partners to learn more about local climate action. As well, don't forget to get out and vote. Advance polls open September 10th and run until, if I recall, September 13th. And voting day is September 20th. For more information, check out Elections Canada website. Good evening. Thank you very much and good night.